Hilary, James and Philip. Minutes of the previous meeting. Can I have a second? Everything okay? Yeah. Any interest? This is going live, so no members of the public, but we are broadcasting this live, so be mindset of what we say. Eamon, can I pass it on to you? I think on this one, if I can just refer the panel members to page 122, Appendix 1. This is the works programme we're working on, financial management. So if you look through on the actions below some of the points that we're going to be covering. Eamon, pass it to you, mate.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. So this is one of a number of updates that we're doing through the year to Scrutiny panel around all things related to council finances and financial management. With particular emphasis this morning in terms of a review of the budget strategy update report, which was presented to Cabinet and was approved at full council last night. What the budget strategy update report sets out basically is a financial planning framework for consideration of budget proposals as part of the annual budget round, and it's a key component of the annual planning cycle. So what it's intended to do is, the starting point is it reviews existing plans, has a look at current local and national intelligence and other intelligence sources in terms of reviewing existing plans, any pressures, any opportunities, and it also in particular looks forward in terms of both funding forecasts and spending forecasts based on a range of considerations, and then it pulls those together and at this stage comes up with some estimated figures based on a set of working assumptions as to whether or not we think that based on those future forecasts we're going to be in a balanced budget position, or whether we're going to be in a deficit or a surplus position, and on that basis that provides a financial framework for consideration of budget proposals for officers to work on and bring back into the corporate member arena through the remainder of the budget process for consideration in due course at Budget Council next February, with the prime intention of producing a balanced budget, but also within that setting a range of resource allocations within that resource envelope that fit key corporate council priorities going forward. That in essence is what it is. What I don't want to do is regurgitate and go through the report in its entirety. Appreciate that scrutiny panel members would have had a chance to read through and consider the contents of the report. But what I'd like to do as we go through in terms of, I think one of the primary considerations for scrutiny panel hearing is acknowledging that there are a range of assumptions built into the budget strategy update report, and some of those assumptions will change through the remainder of the budget round. My view is that at a point in time they're a reasonable set of assumptions, but they are open to challenge and review. And that could be through a range of factors. It could be through further consideration from national government in terms of funding allocation changes. It could be in terms of our local intelligence around our in-year financial monitoring position, accepting that some of the analysis that's fed into the position statement of the budget strategy update report is probably based on fairly early in-year financial monitoring intelligence, which tends to be quite prudent. So we need to take into consideration if there are any significant changes through the remainder of the year and maybe change our assumptions accordingly. So I think it's in that spirit that Scrutiny Panel also has a chance to review and challenge or make comment on some of the key assumptions in here, and maybe other issues as well, for example, reserves policy. There were a number of issues that were aired last night at full council, particularly around some of the key funding assumptions and, as you'd expect, around reserves policy, and also a more general commentary around council financial resilience and sustainability, particularly given some of the national funding uncertainties pending government clarification going forward. The only other comment I'll make at this point, before I open it up to scrutiny panel members, is we've also included some sensitivity analysis into this report. So what we're saying is there's not just one set of assumptions, there's actually potentially a range of assumptions that could range between slightly more optimistic and more pessimistic. Again, in setting out the criteria we've used in terms of varying existing assumptions to come up with a range is based on what officers feel is a reasonable set of criteria to change and vary. But again, we could have a look at that and see whether or not there might be things missing within those criteria that we might want to include as we go through the budget round. And also whether or not the criteria we've used are reasonable. But particularly we've used that to emphasise the point around reserve strategy. And that's the only other point I'll make, is that there's actually a very much a strengthened section around reserves this time, in light of not just local but national interest in council reserves positions more generally, in terms of objective assessments of whether or not councils are holding sufficient reserves to enable them to meet their budget requirements going forward where there's so much funding uncertainty. Okay.
Thanks, Eamon.
No worries.
Graham, do you want to add anything in there? Or?
I don't think so, Chair. Eamon's covered it pretty well, and as you rightly pointed out, this already been through Cabinet, went through full council with a fairly robust debate last night, so I think Eamon's pretty much covered up where we are at the moment.
Thanks. Can I open it to the panel, please? Linda.
Can I just ask one preliminary question then? Given that obviously we received this paper before it had been through the loop of Cabinet and Council, or certainly Council, I don't know if it was before or after Cabinet, has anything changed?
Good question. Point of clarification, no, it's exactly the same report. Yeah.
In which case, I've got only one question. It's a point of detail on a specific element of it around the high needs funding and the assumptions made in relation to that. I hadn't quite followed, and the problem is mine. I've got a good understanding of the pressure, but what the response to that pressure is in the planning.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. There is a significant pressure on high needs. Just going back a little bit, we did actually report on the high needs pressure as part of the 2017-18 outturn report as an unfunded pressure on the bottom line. Previously, it's probably worth reflecting on the fact that high needs has in the past been self-contained within a government funding stream, dedicated schools grant. But what's been apparent over the last few years is that as there have been underlying volume and cost pressures increasing on that area, the funding stream within the high needs component of the dedicated school grant has not been sufficient to meet that pressure. But probably over the last couple of years there's been some flexibility within the overall dedicated schools grant within the other blocks to flexibly apply some of the other funding streams within that overall amount, specifically to high needs pressure. But I think it's fair to say, following the National Fair Funding Review or Formula Funding Review of schools funding that government conducted probably a couple of years back, and has now been implemented, that flexibility to apply funding between blocks is not as apparent as it used to be, but also those pressures have continued. So those pressures are also increasing. So what we set out, and again, it's been acknowledged as part of our in-year monitoring as well, financial monitoring, that it's a growing pressure. I think we, as at Quarter 1 monitoring reported to Cabinet, we'd indicated around about 6.4 million unfunded pressure on the bottom line. We do acknowledge as well that as part of the national funding formula changes that government have implemented, They've actually put more money into the high needs funding block. It's 7 million on top of the pre-existing funding, but that's been spread over a 7-year period, so we're not getting all that 7 million up front. It's basically been released in tranches of 1 million extra funding each year. Ideally, we'd like that funding up front to cover off current pressures, but we are where we are in terms of where national government's at. May or may not change its mind as part of the autumn budget review or the financial settlement review, but we're being cautious and prudent and reflecting just the current government position in this report. So what we've identified as part of our spending forecast from 1920 onwards is the existing base pressure. So we've revised the base budget within that part of the world, that part of the service, in net terms by about 7 million, I think. But we have reflected as well the netting off of the additional funding that's coming in from government. So I would say at this point that it's kind of a holding position, so it acknowledges the existing pressure, and what officers are looking at particularly is getting behind the detail of that pressure in terms of some more sophisticated modelling around what the future pressures are likely to be as well, in terms of cost and volumes, and also what potential mitigating organisational, and not just organisational actions around that. It's a broader sectoral issue for the education system as well, and the school system, including further education colleges as well, because high needs funding extends beyond primary and secondary school. It also extends into further education sector, and we've also got some specialist provision both within the borough and externally outside the borough. So there is a lot of conversations and collaboration across that sector, recognising that it requires what's referred to loosely as a kind of holistic or more systems-led approach. It's not something that the council can resolve on its own in terms of reviewing our current approach and how we could potentially improve both in terms of reviewing the overall funding stream and what we can afford, and if there is acknowledgement that the council's going to have to put additional resources in beyond its current base budget provision, that needs to be very much evidence-based, and that's something that officers will be looking at through the next 2-3 months and beyond, I have to say, because some of the actions that we've got in place aren't necessarily short-term. Some are likely to be medium and longer term, and that also includes, and it's referred to elsewhere in this report, a more comprehensive review of our capital investment needs going forward, particularly around sufficiency in the district, around some of our specialist provision where we're currently placing outside the borough because we just haven't got the capacity in the borough, and that comes at a considerable cost. So we're looking at that as well in the round. So there is acknowledgement that it's a challenging issue for all concerned, but particularly, you know, for the pupils and the children and older young people, those are 16 to 25 as well. So, you know, fundamentally it's about getting better outcomes for the pupils, but, you know, within our reasonable bounds to be able to afford that, which is a difficult balance. The other comment I'd say is that there is more national recognition about the high needs pressures, so it's not unique to this council, and I think there's a growing recognition amongst organisations like Local Government Association as well, in and amongst other lobbying for additional resources, as you do in the run-up to an annual budget. The high needs pressures is equally coming to the fore now. I think probably nationally it's been hidden for the reasons I've said earlier, because it's been self-contained within schools grant funding, but that's not necessarily sustainable for a number of councils now. Okay, thank you.
Before I get John, I think Graham wanted to add something in there.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Excuse me. This is a growing problem, and only earlier this week, in a different part of my world, we've been looking at this, and we have a plan in place at the moment to make a bid to government for some extra funding on this. Whether we'll get that is anybody's guess, but we think we've got a reasonable chance. and we are looking at longer term because it is a growing pressure, as I said. We've looked at some projections and it's worst and best case scenarios and middle grounds, and it continues to grow for the next foreseeable years. But as I said, as Eamon rightly pointed out, we're looking at ways to whether we can do an investor save programme, because we being not perfectly honest, we have too many children going out of area, and it puts pressure on the budget, and it's also not the right thing to do for the children. I mean, some of the things that's going on is really difficult because some of these children have very special needs and they have to go quite a long way out of the area. So we are looking at all this because it does have an impact on the budget, quite a significant impact on the budget, and it is pressure that's growing. As I say, that's not just us, it's nationally a pressure. So we are looking at some investor save programmes. We're talking to various organisations and government about trying to get some extra funding in. But it is an issue, you're absolutely right to identify it. But we are actively chasing solutions for this as best we can within the current framework.
John.
Thank you. Thanks, Eamon. I think the first thing I want to say is to thank Eamon and his team for the work that they've done, because I think this is quite a comprehensive piece of work that's been done, and we should acknowledge that. And I appreciate the scenario piece, because we are in a position where we haven't really got an idea of what the funding is going to look like post 2020. We also don't know what the impact of Brexit if we do leave the European Union. So there are so many uncertainties, as well as the number of moving pieces, that actually pulling together any sort of summary is not the most straightforward thing to do. So I appreciate the work that's gone into this, and that needs to be recorded and recognised. And I'm not sure actually that was necessarily said last night even. I'm not sure. You might have said it in your speech.
I think I did, John. Quite several times.
As you know, Graham, I never listen to you.
And I don't
but just moving on, and just following on from the discussion we just had on the pressures in high needs. I mean, there is a long-term worry, not only in terms of the pressure for children, but obviously these children are going to grow up, and this is a lifetime need. It's not something that is going to end when their schooling and their education finishes. So we do need to look long-term about what those solutions are. And again, if we are late in meeting those needs, the likelihood is we're not only affecting the child's ability to develop, but potentially meaning that the costs will be greater when we finally get around to meeting those needs as well. So I think it really is an important one. And it was one of the things I was going to talk a little bit about, mainly just to say it's good to see that we are now starting to recognise pressures like this early, because one thing that's frustrated me with budgets in the last couple of years is we go through a complex budget process, agree a budget in early spring, and then almost immediately the Q1 outturn comes in and there's new pressures. And you're thinking, well, these can't have suddenly appeared in the last 2 months. But clearly we are getting, well, I hope we are getting better at understanding those issues. And I fully accept that within children's services, given the journey that they've been on, it's probably been quite challenging to get firmer views up front in terms of what the likely pressures are. A couple of other points that I would like to just pick up on. One that was touched on last night is the assumption we made around the number of properties. Well, we've got a number in of 700. And I fully accept the argument that until the plan's in place, we're not going to really grow that. But we're leaving it at 700 over a couple of years. And it's whether that ought to tweak up a little bit. But also my question was, have we also, because it's probably in here somewhere, but I don't know where to find it, acknowledge the perhaps change that the implementation of the SIL will bring. So presumably alongside those properties, that hopefully there'll be additional monies coming in through SIL, whether that's over and above what we would have expected to get through Section 106 or not. It's something we perhaps ought to acknowledge, given that this is a change in the way that we do charge for new build. And then the other one, I know you and I have spoken about this before, Emma, but I'd like to see something explicit about, is school transport. As we grow the number of properties, particularly in the more rural areas, there's going to be increasing pressures on that school transport budget. What I don't want to see, there's already a move to try and restrict access to school transport support. What I don't want to see is that budget just leaving, maybe just increasing by inflation or something like that. The number of children needing school transport increasing because there's more houses built more than 3 miles away from schools or 2 miles from primary schools. And as a result, pressure on that budget, and then we start changing our policy again to tighten it again. So we need to make sure that we are recognising that that budget needs to grow in line with the growth in properties. I'm not sure that's necessarily in there or explicit enough at the moment. The one thing I thought was missing from the risk register, and I appreciate the risk register being provided, is the waste strategy. So clearly, I can never remember which year, is it 2024, is it 2023, 2024, when our current waste contract comes to an end. We know we're unlikely to be able to get a new contract that is anywhere near as beneficial to us as that. And I just would have thought that would have been a risk we would have been recognising at the moment. And unless I missed something, it doesn't appear to be there in the list of risks. And clearly it's something we need to start thinking about. When do we start provisioning for that? And that's going to come in the current plan. So I think that's something we need to pick up. And then my final point again, and it's perhaps more of a question than anything else, is, and I know we've talked about this before, in terms of the capital plan, I still think we're being rather ambitious in our assumptions around how we'll be able to spend the monies that have been put aside for the regeneration of the town centres, because we're kind of suggesting that in 2019-20 and 2021 we're going to spend all of the funds that have been allocated for Dewsbury, and similarly for the Huddersfield plan over a 3-year period. Given the usual time it takes to get up to speed and the conversations we were having last night around some of this, I'm just wondering whether those figures are realistic or whether there ought to be some slippage built in there just to recognise the reality of how quickly it will happen. And then that has a knock-on impact in terms of our funding requirements as well. All right?
I think you've got quite a bit there, Eamon.
Thank you. Yeah, I've written down all the points. Hopefully I'll cover them in turn. If not, you'll... All right, okay, we can compare notes. Just on the general point around trying to capture the key issues and capture them early in the budget round, I think absolutely concur with what you're saying around, particularly around demand management issues, where it's an increasing and growing pressure on the bottom line around children's, adults, and I'm more confident now than I have been in the past that we are capturing those issues. We are working closely with service officers and other key intelligence around to ensure that we've got more sophisticated modelling, underpinning some of the assumptions and understanding some of the risks and opportunities in that as well. So, and I will say that's still a work in progress. So while we've made some headline assumptions in here, through the remainder of the budget round, and I think through successive budget cycles as well, we'll be keen to review those and also challenge back to services as well, where we think that they could actually do more, or where they may be being, or there may be consideration that they're being overly risk averse in some of their assumptions. So it's getting behind the headline figures and drilling down to the detail, and there's a lot of officers working on that for exactly those reasons, so that we can stand behind the robustness and reasonableness of estimates we are putting forward. I think with all budget estimates that we put in, there'll always be an element of things that will happen that are unplanned, that will come left field or we just didn't consider, because like with anything else, a budget is just an estimate at a point in time based on reasonable set of assumptions, and to some extent that's why we have a reserve strategy and a financial resilience element as well. So even if we've got some assumptions, from time to time they could be considerably different. So we just need to recognise and acknowledge that as well. It'll never be a perfect document, but it's got to be robust enough to pass muster, and the Budget Council has confidence to approve. So that's acknowledged as well. On the specifics, might not be in the order that you raised them, so I'll randomly choose them as I go through. Just on the schools transport issue, accepted. There is a broader point around population growth in the borough, housing supply growth, around what the infrastructure implications are, and have we captured those right? And I think that's something that certainly we'll take away and are reviewing with officers again to ensure that while we might be putting in some fairly reasonable, and I'll come back to the council tax in a minute, assumptions around certain income growth on the back of those infrastructure growth, we need to ensure that we're equally capturing some of the impact in terms of service requirements, service provision requirements from the council going forward. So I think that's something that we'll be looking at through as we go through the remainder of the budget round and beyond as well, to continue to monitor that and make sure that we've got the resource allocations right in the areas that it needs to be. So if we do need to start putting in growth requirements in areas like schools transport, then that's obviously something we'd need to consider because there would be a correlation between numbers of pupils in the borough and those requirements. There are other things, of course, that we need to review around schools transport in terms of procurement approach and making sure that we've got value for money as well in the round. In terms of things like SIL implementation, again relating to sort of infrastructure, housing growth, and have we got our core assumptions right in terms of reflecting some of the implications, the financing implications that might bring going forward? Again, it's something that we'll continue to review. From a Section 151 perspective, I would say that what's in here as a position statement reflects at a point in time a reasonably prudent assessment of a starting point in terms of council tax and business rates as well, in terms of consideration of funding forecasts going forward. There is scope to review that. At this time of the year, particularly around collection fund, because we've only been through one sort of quarterly monitoring cycle and we're about to come to a second quarterly monitoring cycle. As we get further through the year, I think our monitoring projections probably err more on the side of being less prudent at the start of the year. So where there is scope to reflect any changes in assumptions around in-year monitoring around collection fund, around business rates and council tax, as we have done in previous years in the budget round, we will review our base assumptions around that, because that did get quite a lot of debate, obviously tied in with the housing growth assumptions going forward. I think I would still remain a little bit cautious for now, pending the adoption of the local plan and making sure that as well in terms of the organisational capacity to actually be able to deliver. The intent's there, the will's there, it's making sure that we can see those things through, but the ambition and our sort of, I suppose, corporate and broader partner infrastructures taking shape to be able to develop that ambition. So I think through the next budget round, certainly, we'll be in a much stronger position to assess where we're at in terms of progress on that, accepting that this is a 3-year plan, so they do get reviewed and refreshed on an annual basis as well. There's always that balance in terms of over-projecting and being overly optimistic too early and then having to rein back, as opposed to being overly prudent to the point that you might end up making some decisions that you might later think, well, actually, had we been slightly more or less risk-averse in some of the funding assumptions, then that might have been a better reflection. Again, the sensitivity analysis emphasises a more general point about the range that we can work within, but I would expect certainly over the next 2 to 3 months we will be reviewing our baseline assumptions around council tax and business rates and maybe tweaking them in light of growing intelligence and increased confidence. Waste management strategy, I'll have to review the wording again in terms of the corporate risk register as to whether or not that's explicitly stated. I think there is reference somewhere in the report. It's probably I can't immediately refer to it here, but I do know there is reference in there somewhere. I think it might be around within the reserve strategy bit, around acknowledging that there will be a medium-term pressure there. I think again, amongst officers, we have had a bit of a conversation about the corporate risk register. That at face value, it's capturing a broad range of corporate risks, probably over the next 12 months. But there's no reason why we shouldn't capture some of the things that we know are going to happen, even though they're 2-3 years hence. So we'll definitely review that, and if it's not explicitly in there, we'll make sure it is for the next iteration. Because you're right, it is a real medium-term pressure, and there will be an increased cost. We need to acknowledge that, because we have got a pretty good deal out of the PFI contract previously. Capital plan. Yes, absolutely agree. Again, and I think I mentioned it at previous corporate scrutiny panel meetings as well, and it is actually said in the narrative that we acknowledge that what's in here in terms of what's set out as the existing plan is to some extent, again, a holding position, because it's just based on the existing approved plans over a 5-year period. There is a major review going on at the moment that officers are looking at. It's kind of a root and branch review, really, of everything that's in there. And we do need to be smarter in terms of some of our assumptions around stretching the profile to make it more realistic. And I think in conjunction with that, maybe some of our current financial procedure rules and processes could be changed as well to accommodate, certainly in terms of cabinet delegation, for example, being more flexible about flexing the existing plan across years where it makes sense, because sometimes you make assumptions about, for example, funding streams coming in to support, particularly around major infrastructure funding through the West Yorkshire Combined Authority. But if there's slippage in those funding assumptions, in light of updated intelligence, if we could actually refresh the plans through the year as well, then I think that would make it more realistic in terms of being able to flex. I think as well, we're also in conjunction with the existing plan, having a look at future capital investment needs as well. So there's probably a whole range of things that need to be incorporated into the refresh plan, but there's going to be careful consideration of what we think we can afford as a council to accommodate those plans. And there'll be a whole range of things coming forward, what we referred to earlier around things like sufficiency agenda around out-of-area placements, and are there things where we can grow our own within the district that requires capital investment, some major reconfiguration of some of the adult social care activity in the district, and there's also a significant area-based review and place-based review of our operational assets in conjunction with partners as well. So there may be some proposals coming forward to support that reconfiguration. So they will be coming through, I think, the remainder of the budget round, and some of those will feature certainly as part of next year's budget. But we have to be mindful as well as to what we think we can afford. So that will be in conjunction with a review of our capital resources, particularly around receipts, grants, everything basically, other funding contributions, and also around prudential borrowing as well. In terms of our treasury management budget, can we stretch the existing plan? If we can make the existing plan more realistic profile, does that give us wiggle room to accommodate some of the new initiatives as well? So certainly around affordability and prudential borrowing, we'll be looking at that in conjunction with the treasury management strategy and approach, which will also come back to for consideration in the corporate member arena later in the year. So there's a lot of challenges there that officers have set for ourselves, and they will be reviewed, and obviously members will give that consideration in due course. I agree with that.
Yeah, I just wanted a couple of items really. Real about the capital plan, for instance, it's one of those, you're a bit damned if you do and you're damned if you don't. We set an ambition, we were accused of not having ambition and vision, and we're trying ambition and vision, and then we said, well, it's undeliverable. So it's always a bit difficult, isn't it? We try to be ambitious, we want to deliver things, and then he said, well, you'd probably been a bit too ambitious in your capital plan. So as I say, we're a bit damned if we do and damned if we don't. And some of those problems are external funding sources. It's right that we seek external funding where it's available, and sometimes that does delay projects, but it's the right thing to do if we can find the money from somewhere else. As they say, let somebody else pay. So that sometimes does cause problems in the capital plan. And I just want to pick up on the housing. you're right, we put 700 in this year, but that's for the 1920 budget, don't forget. Whatever time the local plan is accepted, whether it's January or February, there will not be an instant rolling in of diggers building houses, because there's planning applications, there's land to acquire, there's equipment to get on site, there's all the infrastructure to develop, etc. So there won't be a sudden burst of it. It'll be a steady line, I think. So the real impact, I think, will either come 2021 or 21-22 even, because all those things have got to get in place. Some of these sites are big sites, and it takes a while to get that permission through. So I think it's fair, based on historical evidence for 1920, to go with 700 and then review it part way through next year when we come to the budget update, strategy update next year. I think we'll probably see as being a bit more confident about putting some growth figures in there, because as I said, by that time some of those sites will have come on stream. But I think it's a bit, I don't want to make an assumption about that there's going to be a sudden rush, because there won't. I generally don't believe there'll be a sudden rush because of all these factors that mean it takes a while to get shovels in the ground, in effect. The real impact will come 2021, and I think probably 21-22 in reality, given the timescales involved in planning.
There's a couple of things I want to come back on. I'll start with that last point about the housing. The current report suggests that £700 houses per annum is flat across a 3-year period. That's the point I was making, Graham, really, rather than in the next year. And I think there's something we need to, and I'm not sure what the answer is, but we need to do something as a council to be consistent. And I think Councillor Hall sort of highlighted it last night, where the assumption we have in the finance side is 700 a year. The assumption we have in the local plan was 1,750 a year. Now, I fully accept all of your points about it takes time to get up there, but we need to, externally, we need to appear consistent in some way, or have a narrative that explains that inconsistency. And I think it's quite a big gap at the moment. And we, in a sense, which number are we using to determine what investment we need, in terms of one point I was making last night about the additional resources we need, as in bodies, people, to help get us ready and to build that momentum towards delivering the 1,750 houses a year. If we're assuming 700 a year throughout the period, you might say, well, that's what we're going to resource up to. But actually, if our ambition's greater than that, we just need to get a bit cleverer at how do we bring those two numbers. That it's almost as though the council's having two conversations at the moment, and we just need to try and bring that together in some way. I'm not sure what the answer is or how we do that. So it's more about that consistency bit, because it does impact on other areas. It would impact on school transport, because if we deliver more than 700 houses a year, and we put in the plan that we're only going to deliver 700 houses a year, and reflected that in terms of the increase in the school transport budget, we have a problem there. So we do need to get a bit cleverer about this. And the second one was on the waste strategy. My reason for mentioning that and asking us to be perhaps a bit more upfront and explicit about it is I still think there are a lot of councillors who don't understand what's coming down the track, and we perhaps need to start making them more aware of it. So I think being more explicit is probably helpful to us, so that we try and educate our colleagues that perhaps don't pay as much attention to the minutiae that perhaps Graham and I do, so that they get a better understanding of what some of the longer term pressures are. Part of my reason for sort of wanting to highlight that one. I think, yeah, and in terms of capital plan as well, Graham, I fully accept your points. It's right, we need to have, and until we've got the piece completed in terms of what our vision is for the areas, underneath that you then start to break down, well how is that deliverable, and what phases, and chunking it, and project planning it all through, and programme planning it through. And when you do that, you'll have a better idea of where the funding really needs to lie. I welcome the review that's going on. It's great that that's going to come back, or part of that is going to come back in later on in the budget cycle, so we can reflect some of that in these numbers as they change. And again, I fully support if there is a need to do something to our financial regulation, so it is easier to adapt that capital plan in light of realities, really. because if slippage is occurring, you want to be able to recognise that. For whatever reason that slippage is, maybe, as you say, there'll be genuine reasons where there's funding streams that we're applying for that are taking longer than we anticipated. We need to be able to adapt that, because it does have a bottom line impact in terms of our prudential borrowing and the costs of that prudential borrowing. So if we put it in unrealistically, we're suggesting we're going to have to borrow money we may end up not borrowing, which suggests the budget gap that we're talking about is greater than it might be, albeit at the margins. I think it is important that we do get that right. But, thank you for both Graham and Eamon for your comprehensive responses.
Just to the point you mentioned earlier, asked the question on waste contracts. That's on page 28, 2.157. I know there's quite a lot of information in there, so it can get lost. The other thing, in relation to the housing, the figure that yourself, Eamon and Graham mentioned about over the coming years, one of the issues that we've got, and talking to several house builders, is this figure. The council is not building these houses. We based our figure on kind of data that we have, but one of the issues the house builders have is the coming Brexit. There's a big question mark as to they already have a gap in the market in skilled workers. So when you've got uncertainty of what's happening in the coming next 12 months, that's going to add this burden. So, with the best will in the world, the figures that we've got, they're likely to change. So it's us working in a joint partnership with some of the house builders, and they're currently strained at the moment. So it is going to be a big issue, and I think there's a question mark on some of the figures, but, yourself, Graham, others are working on this. A great deal of it's out of our control.
Just picking up on one of the comments about the narrative, where there might be perceived to be inconsistencies. I think that's a fair point, and we'll need to ensure when we do articulate as part of the formal annual budget report review that we're clear about the narrative, so everybody's clear that it doesn't necessarily contradict the scale of the council's ambition. It's just reflecting a degree of caution about some of the risk factors that might impact on that ambition in terms of timeline for delivery. So it's not explicitly stated here. It's probably quite a dry paragraph just to say, well, we're assuming 700 properties, but I think that's a fair comment to raise about making the narrative more explicit. So we'll pick up on that, certainly.
Just want to ask, is there any further questions? Just want to go through, just want to clarify a couple of points, really. Firstly, the indicator is that we're going to have probably the next 3 months are going to probably be the worst winter that we've seen in the last 10 years or so. Is there any impact on some of the stuff that we've seen in the past? For example, the extra gritting. Is there any pressures on the current proposals, budgets that we've got? Are they likely to change in that respect?
I think the current service budget around winter, I'd probably term it more loosely than that in terms of adverse weather, because we've had situations of roads melting in the summer as well. So we've been bombarded from all sides. It's not just winter, summer as well, probably autumn and spring. Sorry? We'll get the wind, yeah. Too many leaves on the roads, I think, could be a factor. But certainly it is an issue, certainly over more recent years. There's been more unpredictability about the weather. And I think it's fair to say from a service perspective, they have undertaken quite a rigorous review for themselves in terms of looking at how they can operate more efficiently and target and identify the areas of priority within a particular budget envelope. It's difficult to predict with absolute certainty whether those extreme weather pressures are going to continue for the foreseeable future or whether it's a blip. But one thing we have at least done in terms of acknowledging some of those risks in the corporate risk register, and also as part of our earmark reserves review, we've actually set aside a specific amount for that's termed adverse weather reserve, acknowledging that there may be circumstances above and beyond the base budget provision that the service has to be able to manage what needs to be done in order to clear the roads and make our infrastructure safe for the residents of Kirklees. So we have acknowledged this, and we'll obviously review it on a rolling basis as we get further on and see whether or not it's a recurring theme. But there is some risk recognition in the budget.
Sorry, the reason I asked this is that there's been a number of figures branded in local papers as to what the cost of gritting, adverse weather and that kind of thing, so that's the reason. Finishing off, if there's no further questions, can you go through Appendix 1? I think it's on page 128. Just want to make sure that we've covered everything. One, two, three. Yeah, I just want to make sure that these are the remits that we agreed on the work programme. So, everybody happy with that? One, two, two, sorry. Appendix 1, 1, 2, 2. I mean, the difference to last year was, I think we had kind of a different approach. And so what we did earlier on this municipal year was to agree some action points, and this is what you've worked on, and this is what we work in as a panel. So I want to make sure that we all kind of agree on this and take this off. Are we all in agreement?
We haven't set the budget yet. It's very first discussion around it. We can't say this is done.
No. No, this is an ongoing process, but we're not kind of saying this is. We want to make sure that this gets covered in some aspects as a discussion that we can have and input into this process. Because some of this, financial monitoring, is going to be an ongoing process. Emmett, do you want to?
Sorry. Yeah, certainly for the next scrutiny panel, we can report back in terms of Q2 monitoring position. We should have the outcome of the autumn budget by then. So hopefully, yeah. So there may be some emerging further national intelligence, so we can use the Q2 monitoring's position to provide a bit of insight and then challenge back again in terms of some of the budget assumptions as we go forward through the cycle. So it's kind of everything's interconnected in terms of the cycle, in terms of ongoing intelligence, and it's a useful forum to check back as we go through the budget process to next February to just double check and refresh our collective understanding of how we're using that intelligence to inform emerging budget considerations. So yeah, I'd say that we're covering all the points. Okay.
And finally, I just want to echo the words from Graham last night at the full council meeting. Sometimes they do get lost with all the other stuff. And John, this morning, really appreciate for the work you've done and some of the stuff that we can't thank you enough. It's not an easy task. Really appreciate it.
Just on that, thank you very much for the sentiments. I'd just add to that it's very much a team effort. My finance team have worked incredibly hard on this, as have a range of officers across all functions. This isn't a finance-driven report, it's very much a corporate organisational report. We've had buy-in across strategic directors, service directors. We've had various budget challenge sessions earlier in the year, and we'll have those ongoing. So it's a culmination of all that intelligence and hard work that we've been able to produce probably a much more detailed report than perhaps we've done in previous years, which is essential, really, given the challenges that we're facing as a council going forward. Thank you.
Sometimes it is a thankless task with the back office, so please pass our appreciation to all of them. Thank you, guys. Appreciate that. Agenda item 5, we've got Deborah. This is the people strategy. This is kind of feedback from us if there's anything that we need to add. But this is, again, just giving us the insight of what's been going on so far. But I think the overall is if there's anything that we can put forward or we can kind of improve anything from the panel. So pass it to you, Deborah. Thank you.
Okay, morning everybody. I'm Deborah Lucas. I'm the new, kind of relatively new now, I suppose, Head of People Services. I'd like to start by thanking you for inviting myself and my colleagues along today to update you on the People Strategy. I've been with Kirklees now since February, and I've spent a lot of my kind of first few months getting to know the organisation, its people, partners, and certainly our ambitions for our citizens. These ambitions are clearly set out in our corporate plan, which describes the 7 outcomes we want to achieve, and our approach to achieving these through people, place and partners. When I arrived, the 3-year people strategy, it had been drafted and it was in place. It came in place towards the back end of 2017. But in understanding the organisation and its ambitions, I needed to take some time to understand the people strategy and how that was going to help us to achieve our ambitions. So the strategy focuses on a number of key strategic themes, which are around cultural transformation, attraction and retention of high-quality employees, developing our workforce, building leadership and management capacity and capability, and also promoting a high-performance culture. So in order to deliver the strategy, it had been, prior to my arrival, it had been structured into 8 specific work stream areas with a lead appointed for each area and an individual plan sitting behind the kind of the 3 stages that were planned for those 8 work streams. And this was spanning a period of 3 years, as I say, 2017 to 2020. So the 3 stages that were planned were around, there was the discovery stage at the beginning, the development stage, and then the delivery, the implementation stage. So as I said, after taking some time when I arrived to understand the organisation, etc., and the activity behind the people strategy, I think one thing that became evident to me was that we had these 8 work streams. They were all doing some really great stuff, but there was kind of perhaps some overlap between the activity that was going on and between the areas. And what I was really keen to do was to try and consolidate some of this and simplify some of the work that was taking place. And that was to make sure that we were making linkages between activities and we weren't duplicating effort in some areas. So I took some time to work with the leadership team in the service to pull the work together into what I've described as its 3 high-level themed areas, and that's around attraction, development and well-being, and with our people at the centre of that, our talent at the centre of that. And I'm quite a visual person, and the way I visualised it was almost that Venn diagram, because you couldn't do one thing in isolation. Everything kind of overlapped with other stuff. So, for example, you couldn't look at staff development in isolation without thinking about your workforce planning, how you're going to use your apprenticeships, your performance management, coaching, mentoring. Everything to me was interlinked. So it's very much that kind of Venn diagram approach with the high-level 3 themed areas. So I've done some work on that, and this is how we're now approaching the delivery of the people strategy. And each of those themed areas is being led. I have 3 HR managers. They're leading on those 3 themes, with me having the overall oversight of the strategy. What I would add is that hasn't stopped any of the work that was already taking place in the 8 work streams. Like I said, there was some great work going on. It's just made sure that we've consolidated things. In terms of, so that's kind of where we're at, and in terms of our current priority with having the new approach, obviously we need to look at the governance around that. So that's a priority for me at the moment, to strengthen that governance so that we have clear plans and clear lines of accountability in those areas. And also I want to strengthen the performance and success criteria for each area so that we can really demonstrate the impact and outcomes that the activity is having. that part of it is very much a work in progress, and we're working closely with transformation and performance intelligence colleagues on that. So that's kind of the context to where we're at. What I've tried to do in this paper is to give you an overall update on the activity that has been and is taking place across each area of the people strategy. But given the volume of work that's going on, I've specifically this time focused in on development. And my plan would be to come back and then update you on the different areas as we go through. So I'd very much like to come back and do that. Attached to the report, you will see we've very much got a working plan around the development area. That you'll see that at Appendix 2. And there's also a detailed breakdown of the work that's actually taking place in Appendices 3 and 4, and I've included apprenticeships in this update as well. What I won't do is I won't go through each line because obviously I know we're time limited today, but I will give you a high-level kind of taste, a summary of some of the key activity that's been taking place. So I mentioned earlier around our theme of cultural transformation. So to support this key theme across the Council, we've been having a particular focus on developing emotional intelligence as this was identified as being a key leadership and management skill. And what we have done is we've actually designed our own in-house workshop to support our staff around developing and working with emotional intelligence. So we ran a pilot towards the back end of last year, and since then we've been running further workshops. We've run 6 workshops, 80 people have attended across 15 service areas, and we're now rolling that out wider across the organisation. And those workshops have been exceptionally successful. They've gone down really well in the organisation. Running alongside this, we've also been focusing on establishing the Council as a coaching organisation. We're very fortunate. We've got a significant number of trained coaches in the organisation, so it's about maximising them. And what we do is we've been promoting coaching to staff at all levels in the organisation. I think it's important to say that coaching is not just for leaders and managers, it's for all staff in the organisation. We want to be a coaching organisation, a nurturing organisation. And what we have seen is a particular increase in non-office-based staff taking up the offer, which has been fabulous to see. We've also developed a coaching intranet page, so something where staff can go to find out more information. We've got case studies, videos. Again, it's a really good resource that we've developed over the past few months. And it was International Coaching Week in May. And what we did is we had a big marketing campaign during that week to celebrate our coaching successes at Kirklees. And we also used that as an opportunity to make some stronger links with our employee networks and engage them in coaching, how we can support them, challenging any barriers that might be stopping our networks from accessing coaching. So again, that's been really successful. So I think as well as the work that's been happening internally on coaching, what we've also been trying to do, and this is kind of with the theme of working in partnership with others and strengthening our partnerships, is we've made some great links with other organisations around coaching because we do have such a strong coaching offer. We've been working with a number of other local authorities, supporting them to develop a coaching culture. And we've also been working with the NHS about how we can support each other, kind of a shared coaching offer. And one thing that's been really exciting is that we've developed a coaching offer to support third sector organisations, and we're advertising that at the moment through Camoodle, so we're really keen to work in partnership to support the third sector. We've also been doing some work around diversity and inclusion, working very closely with David Bundy and our employee networks on that. Really pleased to say that in June we joined the Inclusive Employers Network, and that really demonstrates our commitment to inclusion in Kirklees and really supports us with our diversity and inclusion journey. The benefits of us joining this have been fabulous. We've got a dedicated account manager, we get monthly updates, we've got access to so many resource packages. So really supporting us at the moment. We've got Black History Month, so we've been able to access some fabulous resources around that that's really helped us that otherwise we might have had to, you know, kind of looked for ourselves, but actually it's all there, it's brilliant, and really some really good stuff in there. So we're really enjoying being a part of Inclusive Employers. And this year we had National Inclusion Week at the end of September, and we really got staff engaged in that. We had lots of different activities, we had daily challenges for staff, lots of free webinars, and again that was through Inclusive Employers because, you know, we've got unlimited access to these free webinars, so we're getting staff engaged in those. And we also had from Equality to Inclusion workshop that we held, and that was a drop-in session at the High Street buildings, and that was really popular as well. We had lots of people come along to that, so that was really great to see. In terms of our kind of learning offer, we have created a bespoke Be Inclusive section, an online section to support employees' learning and development around inclusion. And we're continuously adding resources to that, videos, and we've got a diversity calendar on there now. So again, that's really great to see. And in terms of the online stuff, we've also got some new e-learning modules that we've added to our catalogue around diversity and inclusion. We added those in May this year. Again, talking about our employee networks, we've been doing a lot of work with our young people. And I say we've developed, they've really developed it. They've been driving it forward, which again has been fabulous to see. So they've developed something that we're calling Trading Places. And that's an offer which enables staff to shadow each other, shadow senior managers and vice versa, which is the important bit really. And the aim is to give staff opportunities to gain experience and understanding in the breadth of work, frontline, senior management, whatever work it is, across the organisation. And what that helps us do is that helps us for staff to grow a much wider breadth of skills, helps us to grow our own talent, and also certainly from the young people's perspective, it helps them to progress more quickly in the organisation. I think there was a sense of frustration that you had to be here for so many years before you could progress, but actually with this, they're getting that breadth across the organisation. So that's fabulous to see. Again, we're advertising that to staff, and staff are taking up the opportunities. So that's been really positive. And again, like I say, it's been led by our young people as well. So fabulous to see. In terms of our leadership and management development, we have developed, we've got our Horizons framework that you may be familiar with. This is kind of a general overall framework and it's got 3 stages of development. So the first stage is kind of targeting our new and aspiring managers and leaders, and that's called the aspiring managers. Then there's another area which is around achieving. So that's kind of targeting our current managers and leaders about achieving and high performance. And then we've got the leading area, which is really around our senior leadership team, around strengthening leadership skills for them. So I suppose it isn't a development programme in itself. What it is, it's designed to support conversations, and it allows people to identify and take responsibility for their own development needs based around a number of core skills and attributes, underpinned essentially by our Kirklees behaviours and expectations. Some other stuff that we've been doing around leadership development. We had a procurement exercise earlier this year to select a training provider around developing our leadership and management, and we've now got 30 Kirklees employees who've embarked on a new level 3 team leader supervisor apprenticeship programme. And what I would say is this is fully funded by our apprenticeship levy, which again is fabulous. So it's at no cost to we've paid the money and we're drawing it down. When I say it's no cost, it's no additional cost. It's only money that we've actually paid into the apprenticeship levy. This is being delivered for our staff by, they're called the Babington Group. That's our provider. So as well as meeting the specific requirements of the Level 3 apprenticeship standard, this programme also supports I mentioned the Horizons framework, so this supports our aspiring stage. So this is around our new and aspiring managers, so that's what that's delivering. and the successful completion will lead to a Chartered Management Institute Level 3 qualification for those staff. And what we are doing is we're working closely with Babington, with our provider, to help shape the future development of this programme. And I'm very keen to upscale it, again, because it's drawing down from our apprenticeship levy. So let's upscale it. Let's get more aspiring managers onto that course framework. In terms of who's on it so far, we've got our first 2 cohorts have actually started the programme. Now, how they've got on it is they came in through nominations. They were nominated by senior leadership teams following discussions, and there were discussions around workforce planning, people development, and inclusion was kind of at the heart of that, about why people were selected. And there was an application process, skills gap analysis, that kind of thing, to identify those staff who were going to be on the programme. But in terms of the next cohort, what we want to do for this cohort is work much more closely with our employee networks, so that we're supporting the development of their members and we're helping to address the inclusivity gap. So very keen, as I say, to upscale, but make it much more inclusive for the next cohorts of staff. What we've also, kind of hot off the press, what we've also confirmed is that we're going to participate in a first pilot cohort of regional level 5 apprenticeship programme leadership and management. That's being run by Solace. Specific details are still to be confirmed, but we are part of a regional working group on this, and we anticipate that the first cohort of learners will be starting before the end of the year, but that's very much a work in progress. We're working with the Local Government Association on that. The apprenticeship work stream, it's not formally a part of the development, although I said, coming back to my Venn diagram, everything is kind of inextricably linked anyway, so I thought it might be helpful to just give you a quick update on what's happening around the apprenticeship work stream. As a council, you'd be aware that we are required to meet our public sector target for apprenticeships, which is 2.3% of the headcount over the next 4 years. For us, that means 156 apprentices, and for schools 172. That's based on the current workforce statistics. And these figures include new recruits as well as developing our existing staff, which we call conversions. So that's doing the conversion apprenticeships. To date, we've achieved 83 new starts and 64 conversions, so we're doing well. But obviously there's a lot more to do over the next few years. In terms of our approach, we are targeting some hard-to-fill jobs for our apprenticeships, but what we're also doing is when we see vacancies coming through, we're challenging back and challenging managers, saying, why can't this be an apprenticeship? Because obviously we want to get more apprentices into the workforce. And we're working closely with community organisations, careers service, schools, NEETs, employee networks, again, to promote apprenticeships throughout the organisation. And what we're also looking at is, in terms of building strength in the community and helping us to attract talent from local areas, part of our plan is to establish outreach programmes in communities and with schools. So that's very much something that we want to do. As a corporate parent, we are also in the process of developing a programme to support our care leavers into work, and we've got an initiative that we're calling Saturday Jobs. So it's paid work for care leavers to come in and get some experience in the workplace, with a view to then getting them on apprenticeship programmes and getting them into work, getting them job ready. So that's a really positive piece of work that we're doing at the moment. Another key thing that I wanted to mention was, as part of our commitment to apprentices, we're also currently looking at levels of pay for our apprentices to make sure that they receive a decent rate of pay for the work that they undertake. And we're looking at this as part of the negotiations that are happening around changes to the national pay spine, the pay award, and our local assimilation of that. So again, it's very exciting around our commitment to apprentices. So that's kind of the general broad area around the development. My colleague Alison Monkhouse here has been very much involved in the detail of that. Alison, I don't know if you want to add anything or make any comments.
So I don't want to repeat what Deborah said, because I think that gives quite a good high-level overview. What I would say is there's lots and lots and lots of things happening under that development theme, and lots more still to do. And we're in quite early stages of the plan at the moment, but we are still seeing positive impact. Am I okay? Sorry, do you want me to repeat that? No, it's fine. Okay. Yeah, we're in the early stages, but there's lots more still to do, and we really do appreciate that. But we are still seeing some positive results and impact already, which I think is really good. The example would be around the emotional intelligence programme, which was designed specifically to support the people strategy and the themes around that, making a real difference to people in services across the organisation. We do recognise that a lot of our stuff doesn't necessarily reach dispersed workers across the organisation at the moment, so we are looking at ways in which we can roll that out. So, for example, there's some work taking place in cleansing shortly, where we'll be working with colleagues there to sort of design a slightly different version of that. That's something that could be delivered within cabs and things like that for people to help make sure that people are getting the same sort of development but in a slightly more appropriate format. So that's something we're working on for the future. And in terms of the Level 3 team leadership programme that we've just started, I think it's just worth saying that Babington, who are the apprenticeship provider, have actually given us some really positive feedback so far. The people are just a couple of months in about the commitment of the learners that we've got on that programme and the quality of the work that they're doing. So I think that really bodes well for the future, and hopefully in 18 months' time, once people have completed that programme, that's something that's going to be having a real positive impact for people. And really quickly, just on the Level 5, that is very much hot off the press, as Deborah said. Things have been happening since this report was written, and we're starting to do some work now to recruit 5 people that will take part in that regional apprenticeship. And I think that's a really exciting opportunity for us to be part of that partnership working theme. So lots in the pipeline and lots still to do, but I think that's a really exciting opportunity for us. The only other thing I would say is there's any questions about some of the specific detail, because there's lots and lots in there. I'm happy to pick those up if needed.
Deborah, Alison, thank you. Can I, before I bring John in, open it to the panel, can I just ask a question? What's the total number of employees in the council?
Do you mean including schools or excluding schools? It's about
everything.
It's about 12,000.
The total number that we are responsible as a council that we have directly work for us.
So there's about 12,000 in total, and round about 6. In fact, I've just got the figures here in front of me, so I won't guess. So we've got 6,790 currently.
Thank you for that update. It's nice to get a really positive update. And I'm going to apologise first off, because I can be a bit anal. And on page, well, it's under leadership and management. It's page 95 in my pack, but it looks like it's page 9. We've got by spring 219 instead of 2019. There's just a note missing. I'll say I am anal. I do apologise.
Thank you.
I just want to pick up. But more importantly, one thing that didn't quite gel with me is there was a lot of discussion about we've got a really strong coaching culture and we've got a lot of trained coaches. But then also, it's acknowledged in the report, and the feedback we consistently get is that we're not very good at performance management. And to me, those two don't sit comfortably with me. I don't know whether I've got a couple of other questions. I don't know. Should I do all my bit and then do you want to come back, Deborah? Or
I was just going to say I haven't quite finished my presentation because I was going to go on to performance as the next part. So I don't know. Do you want me to finish and then take questions or take? Yeah, because it just may answer some questions along the way. Okay, so so that kind of wraps up the development area, which is the main focus for this the presentation today. But I also wanted to talk about performance, and our ambition is to be an organisation that provides high support to our workforce through everything that we've talked about, but also high challenge, which fits in with kind of our corporate strength-based approach to how we do things around restorative practice approach. So we have been working with a group of stakeholders across different services in the organisation to research, to understand what's going on, what's maybe not going so well around performance management at the moment in the organisation, because we know it isn't perfect. So really to try and kind of get under the skin of what's happening around that and look at some best practice and research beyond the organisation, and kind of some modern thinking around it. To develop a new performance management framework that will meet the needs of the whole organisation. And I think this framework, I think we recognise that whilst we might need some core principles at the heart of that, we have very diverse work areas in this organisation, and at the moment we've got a kind of a one-size-fits-all, and I think going forward we can't have that one-size-fits-all approach. Now, Diane's come along to the meeting today. Diane's actually been leading a lot of the work around the performance management. Diane, I don't know if you would like to say a few words on some of your findings.
Certainly, thank you, Deborah. We are looking for a change to the current once-a-year appraisal method that we have in Kirklees. I think it's been a question for a while now about whether that's the best fit for the organisation. So part of our work was taking a really good look at what was happening outside of Kirklees. So just a couple of high-level bits of data, bits of information, which is supporting our direction. And that is, one particular survey showed that 43% of UK managers don't believe that the annual appraisal is an effective method. And in terms of the employees themselves, a very separate survey showed that actually less than half employees find those appraisals motivating. And in terms of best practice, what we found was that quite a number of organisations now are dropping the once-a-year appraisal in favour of ongoing methods. Companies such as Deloitte, companies such as Adobe, or even Microsoft. So we took that knowledge, that research, back into Kirklees, and we took that specifically to a wide range of services, looking at the diverse different services that we have. So that might have been revenues and benefits, adults, highways, children's, waste, catering. And what we learned there was it very much mirrored what we had learned that was going on outside the organisation. So again, a couple of those high-level figures. 73% of those Kirklees managers didn't find the current method a useful management tool. And in terms of the employees, it was reporting that 59% didn't find it a useful or supportive exercise or experience. And only 21% of managers thought that their staff performed better as a result of those appraisals. And actually, only 43% of the staff found them motivating. We talked specifically with them in those groups, in focus groups, and we heard sort of comments like they felt it was superficial, a bit of a tick box exercise. They certainly didn't look forward to them. That was quite commonplace. But there was really good support for that thing that we had found that was going on outside of the organisation, which was around the ongoing performance approach. We similarly met with unions and the networks to get some feedback. So where were we as a result of all that? We invited those services to an innovation lab format to look at that data, to look at that information, to analyse it, to challenge it, to really understand it. And what came out of that was, yes, there very much was that support for an ongoing performance method, but as Deborah mentioned, that one size would not fit all. What was right for perhaps somebody in a back office processing council tax might not necessarily fit with a bin man who had an entirely different set of responsibilities. So what the Innovation Lab was coming up with was an approach which should be service-led, which should be designed by the services on a very individual basis, but that was better governed by having some corporate principles with which to look at that design. And those kind of principles would incorporate things like levels of accountability, a check of quality in that work. It might be something about well-being. Very much one of the principles was that it had to involve a consultation method with their teams, looking not at the imposing method, but absolutely doing with. So as a result of that, and as a result of developing those core principles, we are now developing a tool to assist one or two pilot services with a consultation method to work with their staff and their managers to help them come up with a framework which is right for them. And with a view then to actually fully taking that to pilot, probably over the course of about 6 months. A very separate piece of work, and a very important piece of work, actually, which links nicely with a couple of the elements of the people strategy, is that any system of performance is only as effective as the managers and the quality of the managers who actually implement it. So that's something that we're going to be working with for the wider people strategy that does run alongside that. And that's very much where we are at the moment, a service-led, service-designed, individual approach which allows for different contexts, whether that be that of geography or whether that be of different levels and seniority in the service, and adapts to the kind of work that they're doing with an ongoing performance approach.
Thanks, Diane. So just kind of to finish off the presentation, I haven't gone into detail. There are two other huge areas around talent attraction and well-being, so I haven't gone into the detail, but I thought it might just be helpful to give you a bit of a flavour of some of the stuff that's going on in those areas. I will be brief. If I take talent attraction first, we have been spending quite a bit of time reviewing our employee benefit package, reward and recognition. And one thing that we are planning to launch in the next month is a monthly recognition scheme that encourages staff to nominate colleagues for doing something good. We want to start to shine a light on good work, on positive behaviours. So that's something that's coming in the next month or so. We've also developed a workforce planning toolkit that we're piloting, and that supports managers with their succession planning strategies and links very closely to the work that we're doing on talent development and apprenticeships. In terms of wellbeing, we've been working really, really hard over the last few months to turn the employee healthcare offer around so that it focuses on early intervention and prevention and on a holistic approach to dealing with staff, rather than it being a unit where it's reactive, it's a place that deals with staff once they've gone off sick, it's a place where managers refer staff to. We're very much turning the offer on its head, and actually it's somewhere where staff can self-refer, they can get positive support. It's about that early intervention. The unit will go out to workplaces and work with staff. So we've been really working hard to turn that around. And I just wanted to give you kind of a couple of successes from that. So we had a member of staff who'd previously been, they'd been sectioned under the Mental Health Act. They had type 2 diabetes. They self-referred into the unit following the promotion that we'd done to get support and counselling. They accessed the counselling, the support service through that. We've got IAPT based in there, which is fabulous. So they accessed that. They accessed HEAL, which is our healthy eating active lifestyle programme. And they've lost 2 stone. They've reversed their diabetes. And their mental health is now in a much better place. So it's one of our real good, it's just one success, but hopefully it's one of many that we will see coming through taking that different approach. We've also just, over the last few weeks, we've run a pilot in cleansing around podiatry. So guys on their feet all day long. So we've gone in, we've got a podiatrist to go in and help them take care of their feet. And again, it's just happened. So the initial feedback is it's fabulous. I think we had about 20 people go through the programme, and it was great. And I won't talk to you about ingrowing toenails and things like that, but it was really fabulous, and we've had some really good feedback from staff on that, about how well it's been received. And so that's something that we're now thinking, brilliant. It's preventative. It might stop people going off with conditions. So that really is a summary of all the activity to date, and I will, as I've said, I will come back with more detailed updates on those two other areas of the strategy in the future. As I said at the beginning, a key piece of work for us over the next couple of months is working with transformation and performance colleagues. I really want to strengthen the governance of the programme of activity that's sitting behind the people strategy, and also make sure that we've got really clear success criteria with outcomes and risks written up into that. Before I conclude, what I would like to highlight is that since I started at Kirklees, I have developed a performance dashboard in relation to the workforce, and that's scrutinised on a monthly basis by the executive team, and I talk to the portfolio holder about that intelligence as well. And what this performance data allows us to measure is its key intelligence about what's happening in the workforce. I always say it gives you a flavour of the temperature of the workforce. So I look at things like labour turnover, sickness absence, how much we're spending on agency by breakdown of area, the number of employee relations cases that we've got on the go, development activity. So lots of different key performance indicators in there around the workforce. I'm into the third, I think it's about the third month of doing that now. And that really gives you a great picture of what's happening in the workforce. And what I would say is it's only been in place 3 months, but what we are now starting to see is we're seeing some labour turnover coming down. You'll be aware it was pretty high in children's last year, but that's now coming down and it's stabilising. We're seeing agency spend coming down. And one thing I'm really particularly pleased about is sickness absence had been on an upward trajectory for about 12 months. That's now plateaued, and I'm really pleased to say it's small steps, but it is starting to come down. So that's fabulous for us as an organisation. So I've given you an overview of progress today. It is a 3-year strategy. We are very much at the beginning of that journey. We've still got a long way to go, and I would very much, and my colleagues would very much welcome any feedback that you can offer us, any areas that you might be interested in, or any areas that you're able to support us with. Give us some guidance so that we can continue to make improvements along the way. Thank you.
Thanks, Deborah. I've got John and Linda, and before I do that, podiatry. That's going to be, you straight after me for elected members. John.
Thank you. I'll say really positive report and welcome that. There's quite a lot in this that I like, but just a number of comments from me. Firstly, you talked about having an inclusion week. I can't remember when that was, but we talked about an inclusion week. I wasn't aware of that. So there's a question about when do you involve councillors? It's a bit about councillors being at the heart of everything. And similarly for your monthly recognition scheme, when you launch that, don't forget we're on the receiving end of service, particularly good service from a lot of members of staff, and it would be good to involve us and do some engagement to make sure that we're doing those recognitions as well as sort of other members of staff. One worry I have is as we move to a streamlined workforce, as we move to place-based working, mobile and agile, working from home, there's a risk of dislocation or isolation by some individuals, and I hadn't heard anything explicit about whether that's in the well-being, but explicit about acknowledging that and what we're thinking through, what the impacts of some of this mobile and agile working and having less people in particular places may have on people, and how do we make sure not only that their health and well-being is okay, but how do we make sure that we're getting the right messages to them and that they're getting the support that they need when they need that support if they're working more remotely. So that's just a question, really. Similarly, on the well-being, we recently had World Mental Health Day. So I think, you know, we need to be looking for opportunities like that to perhaps promote that, the employee offer. So that's just I don't know whether we were doing anything around that, but, you know, if we can pick up on things like that, so other things you can link into that are appropriate to perhaps help highlight some of these things, and, you know, it then links into other things that are happening nationally and perhaps locally as well. I particularly like your performance dashboard. You know, in my previous life, that was something that we had in the bank where I worked, and I absolutely understand the impact that can have, and how it's a very powerful tool to give you that, as you said, that sense check on how healthy the organisation is at the moment. And I think a lot of actions tend to you know, flow from that in terms of what's going well, what's not going so well as well. So I do welcome you putting that in place. I think that's an excellent thing. I've mentioned my concern about performance and culture. I understand what you're doing there, and I think there's a lot of benefit in that. I've never believed in this. You know, I've managed an awful lot of people in my career, and I never believed in this. I only talk to them once a year about their performance. It's ludicrous. We had to have an annual appraisal because my staff that worked for me had a proportion of performance-related pay, so they had to have that annual discussion. But that was a short discussion because you were talking on a regular basis. So fully support a move towards something like that. The one thing I didn't quite pick up, I mean, it was talk about it being service-led and adapted to the workforce, and I totally get all of that. But the one element that I would hope is in there as well is that understanding and that regular discussion about career aspirations. And we will have, and we almost need a different model, and I mean, I've done this myself, where you have some of our colleagues who are very, very comfortable in their current role, have no ambition to do anything else, and we don't want to be continually harassing them to do something. But similarly, we also have some colleagues that are very keen to aspire and advance their career, and are we making sure that the performance system we put in place is adaptable in that way as well as for the different types of workforces and different types of roles that people are performing. And then finally, and this is a bit left field really, but I'll throw it in there anyway, and Graham will recognise this one. Library service. No, so, I mean, it would be strange if I didn't manage to get libraries in somewhere, wouldn't it, really? One of the things I've been talking to Carol about in terms of the library service review that we're going through now is as we shrink the workforce in libraries, one of the difficulties we're going to face is holiday cover. Because as you have less people available, you still need to make sure everybody gets their holidays, but we still need to operate that frontline service. And what I've been suggesting to Carol is, you know, is there an opportunity to offer some summer casual work, perhaps in libraries, and it might be appropriate elsewhere, particularly for university students would be ideal. So during their summer, to help us, because and I'm sure it won't be just libraries, I'm sure there'll be other services that are going to be similarly impacted, and I see it also as a volunteer in libraries. All the volunteers damn well go off on holiday as well, so we have difficulty covering the volunteer shifts as well. So it's just something I wouldn't mind a thought on, or, you know, are we exploring that as our workforce changes and we become more adaptable? But thank you for your confidence. I thought it was an excellent presentation. Thank you.
Okay, if I just come back on a few points, and Diane, you may want to come back on the performance point. So in terms of the point around the mobile and agile working, what we have been doing is we've been working with IT on a staff account. So there's the citizens account, so we're looking for something similar for staff, so that no matter where you are, you've got access to support, to information. So that supports that agenda and hopefully, like I said, it's a work in progress. So we're working with IT on that piece of kit. In terms of you touched on well-being and the World Mental Health Day. What we do have now is we've kind of revamped. A couple of months ago, we revamped our health and wellbeing champions, and we have got some specific mental health champions in the workplace now. So they meet monthly, and they have kind of a monthly focus on different areas. So they will come back to the workplace, and they may focus on mental health in the workplace. They may focus on healthy eating, active lifestyle. So they've now got a monthly programme that obviously we support them from the centre, and then they go out, and then they also come back and bring intelligence back to us if there are any areas of the workforce that might need a visit from the healthcare people. So that's very much how that works. So they will be that focus. So that's a really great network that we've established, and it's a growing network as well. And one of our key messages that we keep pushing out there, and it's our campaign at the moment, is it's okay not to be okay. It's okay. You need to talk. And I did a talk at our young employees conference this week. I think it was the day before World Mental Health Day, and it's work with us to break down the stigma around mental health. If we don't talk about it, then we're never going to break down that stigma. So we're really working with our wellbeing champions to push those kind of messages out, wherever we can. Your left field question is great, because it's something, and you'll be aware of the issues that we've had over the last few months with the bins service. So people not being able to take holidays, we've had pressures over the summer, that kind of thing. So one of the things that we're looking at to tackle that going forward is having kind of a bank of staff who are available to cover the holiday period. And we've had thoughts about maybe working with the university, with students who might be looking for summer work, and that would clearly link in with the library service that you've raised. So it is something that we're looking at for a different purpose, but it's great to hear about the library stuff, because we can then feed that into it as well. So that's brilliant. So thank you for that. Did you want to pick up the point on performance?
I apologise for my crackling microphone. So the question was around that important aspect of development with regard to our performance framework. I didn't share the full detail of the service-designed performance framework, but there are three elements to it. One, context; another, style of delivery; and the third one, content. And within content, one of those elements, one of those principles, is considers development and career aspirations when, if appropriate, because as you rightly said, it's not appropriate for everybody at every moment. So hopefully that just gives you that assurance. If you would like to see the full document at any point, it's only small and succinct, but you'd be very welcome to have that.
Just one question remaining about the monthly scheme that you asked a question on. Employee recognition. I think, Deborah, did you cover that?
Yeah, and I think one thing that we will make sure that that members are involved in that recognition scheme, because as you say, you receive services, and so it'll be fabulous to receive nominations from members for good work that's done. Thank you.
Thanks, Deborah. Linda.
Thank you, and thank you for the report. There's lots of really good stuff going on. It's good to hear. I've got just a couple of points, if I may. One's a really quick one. I echo the Councillor's comments about the dashboard. That sounds impressive and powerful, and I wonder if it's something that could come to scrutiny on occasion, so that we can see the trends in the metrics that you're following. That might be quite useful. My more substantive point was around workforce planning. because a lot of what we've heard and what your three themes seem to be addressing is the sort of hows. How we'll attract and how we'll develop and how we'll keep people well, effectively. And at a time of such significant transformation within the council, both in terms of what they do and how they do it, underpinning all of that has to be getting the right people in for now and the future. And to see in the report at paragraph 5.4 that the piece of work in relation to workforce planning is in its early stages just slightly unnerves me at a time of such significant transformation within the council. And I wonder if there's any more you can say about that.
Okay, so that piece of work, it's a pilot toolkit. That doesn't say that we're doing nothing around workforce planning. What we are doing is, we've got a lot of workforce data, and the performance dashboard sets out that data about the composition of the workforce. So we are analysing that data. We work with managers to do that. We worked with managers to do it when we were looking at the cohorts around who do you want to put forward for the Aspiring Managers programme. So we looked at the kind of the diversity, the age profile. So we're working with that on a daily basis. I think what I referenced in the report is it's just a toolkit to help managers, but we're working with managers every day around workforce planning. And as you rightly say, we're an ageing workforce, and we know that we've got some issues coming up in the not too distant future, so we're having to plan for those. There's also a lot of work that we're doing around the social workforce, and we're working at a regional level on that as to how we address it, because it's not a Kirklees problem, it's not even a regional problem, it's a national problem. So again, we're plugged into a lot of things around workforce planning across the board. So it isn't just that, sorry. And when I come to you and talk about the talent attraction part of the strategy, that will cover it in a lot more detail about all the stuff that we're doing. Thanks.
Thanks, Deborah. I've got a few questions. The first one is in the induction on page 93. It's the last bit on the chart there. Are we talking of induction where every employee has to take part to kind of expect it up? What Kirklees is, the expectations they have to, the things that they might not be sure of. Is that for every single employee and the new we take on?
I can just say a little bit more about that. The induction project, a little bit like the performance work that Diane's been working on, what we've been doing is, thinking about what is the induction experience, if you like, for every single employee in the council. Is that working? What might we need to look at, and how might we do that differently? So it's a similar, Deborah talked about the 3 stages at the beginning, so we're at that kind of discovery stage, doing quite a bit of research around how that feels for people at the moment and how we might want to change that and do that differently. We haven't got the solution to that yet, that's where we are, but it would cover basically the whole experience for people, and it would also be thinking about people's experience before they even join the council, having been appointed. You get your letter, but actually it starts from there. What information are you getting beforehand? What conversations are you having beforehand? But also when employees are not necessarily new to the council, but when they might be new to a role or a service area, because that's a whole, you're still working for Kirklees Council, but it can be a whole different experience. But also for people when they might return after a period of absence, so whether that's maternity leave, long-term sickness absence, again, what's your sort of welcome back to the organisation, and are you, have you got everything that you need as part of that? And as part of the discussion, we're also looking at different aspects such as mandatory training, what things absolutely must you have, as well as all of the wider. So it's a similar type of project to what Diane's described around performance, but at a slightly earlier stage. And I think that would come back as part of one of the later updates, because induction, it fits in the round, but it's sort of been allocated within that attraction theme.
Yeah, it was just to sort of pick up on that. I think the other authorities that have very successful, I suppose, senses of identity across the council, where it doesn't matter where you work, you know fundamentally what the council's trying to achieve and what its priorities are. Their induction programmes have been really successful because everybody has that kind of broad understanding. I think what we've perhaps done here that hasn't helped that is that we do tend to not commit to some things for a long period of time. So what we say this is our way of working, this is what we're saying our key objectives are, but then it changes quite quickly, and actually that's quite hard to get that sense of understanding across the organisation. So it's about being quite brave and committing to things for a bit of a longer period of time, because whereas there'll be subtleties and flexibilities, if we're very clear about what the council is trying to do, then we need to stick to that. So the induction will only be successful if corporately we can hold the ring on those ambitions and see them through the long term.
Thank you, Rachel. And one of the things, I'm talking from kind of the private corporate side of it, where when you join, not necessarily on your first day, but throughout the course of the first couple of months, you go to an induction course and it tells you kind of all the, not the nitty-gritty, but tells you, kind of gives you a snapshot picture of the company itself, you know, what the expectation is, what you can do, things like with the new GDPR, you know, the whole basic stuff. And if there's any issues, some of the stuff that you've mentioned in a very thorough detailed report, that goes back into where do I get referred to. And one of the other key aspects is working for an organisation such as Kirklees and Leeds and all the other local government councils throughout the area. It's about the benefits. What is me as an employee working for Kirklees? What are the benefits that I can tap into? And I think it would be nice for employees, because when you look at the figure, just under 7,000, Leeds has got a lot more. You've got West Yorkshire Council up and down, and maybe in a kind of a collective scheme, that's a huge number of customers can tap into something, just like the armed forces and, you know, the medical, the ambulance services, they get discount. So it's kind of way of saying, come on board, but it's kind of introduction, but a bit of a perk at the same time. Be nice to have that on board.
Okay, so yeah, so that is something that is part of the talent attraction themed area, but we do have some of that already, although we're improving it. We've got My Staff Shop, which I think the feedback we're getting is it can be quite complicated and I'm not quite sure how to use it, so we're trying to work with the provider to come in and simplify it so that staff, you know, it is a great benefit, but if it's complicated and staff aren't accessing it, well, that's not good enough. So we are trying to improve a lot of stuff around the employee benefits package.
Final question. We do have, it seems, and don't hold me to that, quite a young staff force. If you look at the executive team, they're in their early 30s. When you go across, we have lost a lot of I'd say we've got talent, but the talent that we had over the years of kind of a mixed bag, are we trying to attract people who are, and I'm not going to put an age number to this one, retirees or something, that we can bring them back? Because some of the conversation that I've been having, generally when you're out and about, is, I've got 10 hours a week that I want to spend helping out, and I've been in the corporate side of things. I want to go back into helping, not necessarily volunteering, but utilising my skills in local government. So is there any way we can attract these, and not necessarily on a full-time basis, but kind of find that balance that we can utilise this experience and they can help out and they feel that it's worthwhile rather than just sat there? I mean, that's one of the issues that they're having at the moment.
So I think from the performance, from the intelligence that I have on the workforce, we really are an ageing workforce. I think we're lucky to have a young executive team. So the focus has been on attracting younger people, if you like, and having a more diverse workforce. But I take the point that there are older people who want to come back into the workplace as well, and I think that's been recognised in a way through one thing that my view was around the level of pay that we were paying apprentices. If you're 16 and you want to do an apprenticeship, then that may be okay, but if you're 56 and you want to come back into the workplace and do an apprenticeship, then living on £3-4 an hour might be a bit trickier. So I think it's more, that's kind of reflecting, we want to attract apprentices of all ages into the workforce. Yes, we do have a focus and we do target younger people, but actually we recognise that there are older workers who may want to come into our workforce as well.
Thank you. Do you want to add anything to that, Rachel?
I think just in terms of the Young Employee Network, because obviously Deborah mentioned that we had a conference with them this week, and I chaired that, and actually one of the new elected members came as well, which was really helpful. I definitely get a sense from them that they want the opportunities, but they don't want to be constrained by process and you know, really some of the challenge back on our job descriptions that say extensive experience that implies longevity rather than qualities and skills is really apparent. So while we sort out our policies and procedures and recruitment processes, we've got this, as Deborah said, this kind of shadowing that they can trade place with. You know, I've put myself on there, so if someone wants to come and trade places with me for a day, we can do that, and it gives them scope to look at whether that's the direction of travel they want to be in. So, you know, we've definitely got that clocked. I think one of the difficulties is in some of the areas where actually there is quite a lot of expectation of people with strong organisational memory. We actually don't have the succession planning that we need, so things like risk, and those areas where people have got a huge amount of, oh, well, we did that before and this is what happened. You lose that sometimes when you get a big turnover of staff. So we've got to try and balance that, keeping that organisational memory and not forgetting things with how we get young people up to speed with some of this stuff. And sometimes those sorts of areas aren't as appealing to people as some of the others. So it's how we get the right pegs in the right hole, I suppose.
Guys, Deborah, Alison, all of you, thank you very much. I mean, it's a thorough, detailed report, and I really appreciate for your input. I've just been talking to Elena and was trying to figure out if we can have this back. I'm not going to put a date to this for the simple reason this is ongoing. There's a lot of stuff which is still that you're trying to work on. So can I just leave that for a later time rather than just put a date and then saying come back on that one? We can fit it in the coming. So appreciate. Thank you.
Thank you.
Agenda item 6, work programme. Can we go through that? That's page 115. This is the coming for the next couple of meetings. Are we happy with? Firstly, are we happy with this? Yeah. The only addition to this one is the people strategy we're going to add on. The next one is going to be financial monitoring work programme agenda. I'm trying to get the Democracy Commission in there. And John, as you've been involved in that, probably you to be part of that feedback, if that's okay. And it's kind of a wearing two hats, but you've been involved in that quite extensively.
Yeah, I mean, the opposition is not here, and we've got Carl coming, and I don't know whether Catherine will be coming to our team, but I'm more happy to join the conversation.
So if we're happy with that, if there's any changes, we can add that on as we go along. And then finally, agenda item 7, future meetings. 27th of November is the next one. 29th, sorry. Any other issues? I officially close the meeting. Thank you for attending.